Surprised, Jin asked if Veridin was going to use numerous blood on Dante. Although numerous blood was a level lower than a tier, it could not be recreated. The Rankandels and Zippels searched for these artifacts with bloodshot eyes. In fact, she was not even at the head, but in the hands of Veridin, who went on a journey. Jin couldn't understand it. This implied that the Zippel family had reserved blood exclusively for Veridin. The greatest family of magicians in the world, the Zippels, had only 2 gems. Veridin replied that he was using blood, so Jin had to keep it all a secret. Jin couldn't ask why he was going to use it on Dante. From a rational point of view, Veridin's actions were unwise. Although the Heron family was weaker than Zippel, they still competed with each other, and Dante was the presumptive heir of this family. At the moment, Dante's death was the best scenario for Veridin. Veridin chuckled. Losing an equal is like losing a friend. Veridin brought Numerous's blood to Dante's mouth and spoke. Using magic, he split the gem, and a red mist appeared. Scarlet clouds of energy slowly, like water, slid into Dante's mouth. As soon as Numerous blood entered his body, Dante reacted. They couldn't see what was going on inside him, but his pale face was gradually returning to its normal color. Dante sighed hoarsely, as if he had come out of the water. Shocked, he looked at his own body in amazement. He knew that he had escaped death. Veridin breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there don't seem to be any side effects. He wouldn't want anything to happen to Dante because of the side effect. The blood of Numerous. She revived the almost expired Dante in an instant. Jin never thought that Veridin would be so unpredictable, doing a huge favor to another person who was no different from the enemy. He was not an easily judged character. While Jin was catching himself thinking difficult thoughts, Veridin stood up and grinned. He turned to Jean and Dante. The price for Numerous blood is huge, don't they know that? Hearing that Veridin had used Numerous blood on him, Dante trembled. How can he repay this priceless artifact now? Jin waited anxiously for what Veridin would demand. That was more like the truth. Veridin was a Zippel. What can a member of this greedy family demand? The heavy atmosphere was destroyed in a flash. With a smile, Veridin asked Jin to buy him something to wet his throat with when they were done here. Jin's going to be here for a while, isn't he? Veridin did not accept the word no as an answer. Also, if Jin sees him somewhere, he shouldn't act like he's seeing him for the first time. Jin lowered his head and sighed, hiding his smile. Veridin Zippel. Jin thought Veridin was just an idiot, but it turned out he was a cool idiot. The 2 future heads of the strongest families gave each other 5. In one of the bars, the 3 of them were sitting at the same table and drinking from large mugs. In front of Jin was a bag with 1,000 gold coins and a chest. Veridin was delighted that Jin had taken the chest and the bag of gold. They told him to choose one of the prizes for winning. How much of a maternity hospital do you need to be in order to squeeze both? This was not the first time in the history of the arena that the winner had asked for both prizes, but it's never been so dumb. Jean almost died in that dumpster. He didn't sleep for the first few days and almost killed Dante fighting with him, risking your life to take these pathetic prizes and choose only one. He couldn't accept it, recalling the wave of despair when he thought Dante was dead. Jin thought that even owning the entire pirate gang of space would not satisfy his disappointment. Jin replied to Veridin that there was a limit to any patience. Zippel laughed. Fair. They almost kicked their hooves off there. Jin handed the bag of gold to Dante. He didn't need it. Since it came to prizes, he decided to give it to Dante. The Herons had a lot of money, but Dante decided to take this gold as a keepsake. He said he would keep this gold in a frame. Elated, Dante picked up the bag and shook it. A solid ringing sound echoed throughout the chamber. Seeing Dante's satisfied look, Veridin also demanded a gift for himself, since Veridin had indeed done something special today. He thought it kind enough to offer him something. Jin wanted to keep the trophy from the chest for himself, so only the chest itself remained. Having come up with a good idea, Jin nodded. Jin broke the lock and opened the chest. This was the first time he had shown the contents of the box. Inside the box was a poorly drawn topographic treasure map. Veridin was delighted to see the treasure map. It was a thing he had only heard about in legends. Had Jin given him something so valuable? Jin replied that he would not give him the card. He threw an empty chest into Veridin's hands. Now the chest belongs to him personally. After catching the trunk, Zippel thanked Jin. He was quite pleased with such a gift. One guy says he will put a bag of gold in a frame, and the other is grateful for an empty chest. Are they idiots? Jean had a question for Dante. Why didn't he use a secret technique? Jin had told him not to give in. Dante answered after a moment's hesitation. The same applied to Jin. Although Dante didn't know what Jin was hiding, Jin clearly had aces up his sleeve. He was completely sure of that. Dante noticed. As Jin expected, he has a good intuition. He replied to Dante that he did not understand what he was talking about. Dante said he was always ready to fight him at any time, but without giveaways. Veridin supported Dante's words. The day is coming when they will fight each other, leading their clans. He was looking forward to it. Veridin laughed. He said that, but to be honest, it's better to cool off and stay friends. Jin chuckled. The future head of Zippel says something so sweet. Veridin was very embarrassed. He said it was just words. One wrong step and it's over. Although they were currently sitting in a circle with a mug of delicious liquid in their hand, one day they would have to fight each other. Enemies who were friends, friends who were enemies. Their relationship was like this. Jin was wondering what the end of this controversial relationship would be. Suddenly, Veridin remembered something. He asked if they had heard about Pseudo-Veridin. Someone was impersonating him. Hearing this, Jin would have spat out what he was drinking right now, but Jin safely kept his composure. Dante exclaimed in surprise. Did someone impersonate Veridin on the territory of the Zippel family? Although he didn't know who had the nerve, he was delighted. Zippel sighed. Also, because of what happened to his uncle Andre, the honor of their family was severely damaged. After that, Veridin fussed, saying that he was not trying to shame Jin. The rumor that the culprit is from the Rankandel family has not been confirmed. Still confused, Jin asked what Veridin was going to do with the impostor. He replied that the impostor needed to be caught. To do this, Veridin wanted to hire high-ranking magicians to find the impostor. Jin told him it wasn't the best idea. If he were an impostor, he would have started a rumor to confuse the people. Since Veridin said that he would have to look for Zippel on Earth, then he should expect sidelong glances. So Veridin will only make a fool of himself. Therefore, it is better to deal with the copycat later. Veridin nodded, agreeing with Jin's words. Jin was right, so he should come back to the copycat issue later. Jin stood up, saying it was time for them to wrap up. Dante was surprised, because they hadn't been together long. Jin didn't stop and started walking away, saying that he felt that just a little more and he would get attached to their skinny asses. Unlike Dante and Veridin, he had a lot to do. Veridin immediately understood what Jin was talking about. Most likely it was because of the rank of a reserve flag bearer. Jin nodded, easily acknowledging this. Veridin said goodbye to him, unexpectedly calling Jin a friend. Jin was stunned. He was recognized as a friend for the first time in a long time. Although it was a short meeting, that night Jin really wanted them to continue to be his friends, not enemies. Shiren opened the letter from Kashmir and began to read. Sender, Kashmir. Recipient, Shiren Rankandel. Report, Jin Rankandel defeated Dante Aaron and became the champion of the space arena. Note, Jin Rankandel has reached the 6th rank. Just a couple of lines. It was all Kashmir's letter, not a single line of banter or greeting. A sample of brevity. However, after reading the letter, Shiren felt disappointed. It was obvious that Kashmir reacted this way to his request to write in essence. Of course, he was very proud that Junior had a promotion. However, he felt as if he had been tricked. Seeing Shiren's impassive face, Khan cautiously asked if something had happened to his young master. Shiren replied that nothing had happened. He rather reported that Jin had defeated Aaron's grandson and gained the 6th rank. It was obvious how pleased Shiren was with his youngest son's achievements. He clutched the letter in his hands and burned it. Shiren turned to Khan and asked him to tell Kashmir that he wanted to talk to him over a cup of tea. It was time to remind my friend about himself. At that moment, the Kashmir suddenly trembled. The chill struck out of the blue. Jin was surprised. Was Kashmir cold a meter from the fireplace? He couldn't help but think that Kashmir could get sick. Kashmir could only agree with that. He thought he should take his medicine. Suddenly, he remembered the map Jin had told him about. Kashmir asked Jin to show him the map. Jin pulled out a card and put it on the table. It was a treasure map that Jin had obtained in the space arena. He thought that the treasure map as a prize from the pirate gang had no value. In fact, Cosmos wanted the winner to take the treasure chest instead of 1,000 gold coins. He also determined that the treasure map he stole during one of his predatory conquests was useless. In fact, it was a scam. However, due to the fact that both prizes went to Jin, Cosmos was unable to make much profit that day. Jin wondered if Kashmir knew what was on the map. Taking the card in his hands, Kashmir realized that this was the first time he had seen such a card. It is unlikely that even he will be able to recognize the place where the treasure is located. Julia stared at the map in her father's hands with glowing eyes. She wanted so much to look at this map and find the treasure. Suddenly, Julia's gaze changed. She seemed to have entered into a kind of trance. Kashmir was somewhat concerned about this. Suddenly, Julia pointed her finger at a place on the map. She said that there was something important and dangerous here, and it was very valuable. Julia's eyes, twinkling with curiosity, began to glisten with tears. She fell down and began to sob. After activating Asmila's ability, Julia saw something else, a treasure hidden somewhere deep, and the tragedies that occurred because of the said treasure. Kashmir was horrified, not knowing what to do. Murakan immediately jumped off her head and transformed into his human form. He shouted that Julia's gift was going crazy. Murakan ordered Kashmir to summon Julia's dragon contractor, which calmed her down. Activating a divine ability against the will of a young contractor was not good news, especially for the contractors, as is nice because they could lose their sense of reality. At this time, she needed her guardian dragon. Kashmir ran outside to call Latri. Latri appeared a few seconds later. Mirakan immediately handed Julia over and explained the situation, telling Latri to bring her to her senses. Latri hugged Julia. His eyes closed and blue energy enveloped them. Soon the child began to calm down. At that moment, Alice came running, who heard Julia crying. She asked Kashmir about why their daughter was crying. Soon Latri, in his human form, shuddered from time to time. He had clearly seen shocking pictures. After 10 minutes, Julia was fast asleep, and Latri took a deep breath, sweating profusely. He handed Julia over to her mother. Alice was relieved to pick up the sleeping Julia. Mirakan approached Latri and praised him. Latri awkwardly apologized for not being able to say hello properly due to business, despite the fact that he had not yet been born during the heyday of Mirakan. Latri treated the shadow dragon with the utmost respect. Mirakan shrugged it off. He didn't care about that right now. He was more interested in what Julia saw, the future or the past. Latri replied that she had seen the past. Mirakan frowned. The contractor Asmilla could only see the past in certain situations. For example, deep-rooted desires or resentment. Latri explained that when the contractor Asmilla looks into the past, he sees images related to something. This time Julia saw something related to the map. If Latri had come a minute later, the irreparable would have happened. The thought made Latri's blood run cold with horror. What I saw was terrible. No matter how young Latri was, he lived for more than 500 years. He knew how terrible it was for Julia to witness such visions. Latri slowly began to explain, recalling what he had just seen. The image of the primeval lands. The population of this place worshipped their gods and was completely cut off from civilization. Not knowing the worries, the natives defended the world in existence, until one day they appeared. The aliens turned out to be magicians who came to supposedly study the culture of the locals. However, excavations immediately began in search of an unknown object underground, and they also asked residents to provide strange services. As a result, they killed the child of the natives, a very young man who was younger than Julia. Deciding not to be petty, the intruders got rid of everyone who posed a threat, trying to get something, namely, a certain sacred relic, which was worshipped by the natives. After listening to this moment, Jin remembered a story he knew. He immediately asked Latri to draw an image of this relic. Latri got a pen and paper and quickly drew the object he saw. According to him, the relic looks like an ordinary silver mirror, but light comes out of it. Jin was convinced of his thoughts. He would see the image of the relic. Without a doubt, this is the Fountain of Mana, an ancient artifact that was discovered by a brave journalist before Jin's regression. At that time, he scrupulously revealed the existence of the mirror, as well as the atrocities committed by the Zippel family against the natives of Colin. However, the journalist could not resist the massive clan alone. The Zippel family exploited the locals. During one of the missions, Jin even personally saw what the freaks from the Zippel family were doing. The wild lands and ruins of Colin. Magicians of the Zippel family. Having connected this, Jin decided that the map shows the location of the mirror. The ruins of Colin. One of the main members of the Zippel family sat and had a good time among the corpses of the natives. This man killed them only because they annoyed him with their voices. He was clearly insane. At this time, the praying priestess began to cry. Their time has finally come. Soon she calmed down, because it was time for her to meet the guest. The Fountain of Mana. Just think, on a map obtained from some pirate, there is a key to an ancient artifact. Perhaps the natives of Colin, oppressed by the Zippels, wanted someone to notice the map and hoped that an adventurer would come and free them. Well, Jin was planning to visit the ruins anyway. He needed to find the mirror before the Zippels and prevent them from creating a powerful army of magicians. In addition, illegal magic experiments in the area had to be investigated. Personally, there were many reasons for Jin to go. Mirakan noticed the strange emotions on Jin's face. Therefore, he couldn't help but ask about it. Jin seemed to know something about it. They did not know that Jin was aware of the tragedy of Colin and the mirror. That's what's wrong with being a regressor. Although it was not difficult to solve this problem, Jin replied that he had a bad feeling. It was enough to satisfy the dragon's curiosity. Jin turned to Kashmir. He apologized for Julia's terrible experience. Kashmir didn't blame Jin for that. A person who had signed a contract with God did not have to wait for an easy path in life. Everyone knew what she was doing. Latri asked Kashmir not to worry. He's always there. Whatever happens to Julia, Latri will help. Kashmir felt more relaxed. Now he decided to first find someone who could decipher the symbols on the map. Since they found out that the map is not easy, then it's time for them to hit the road. Kashmir asked Jin to rely on 7 colors and expect. Jin smiled. That's why he settled in Tikkun. He confidently said that he was counting on Kashmir. Although he said so, it wasn't that simple. Several hundred years ago, the Zippel family exterminated the people of Colin, and the survivors faced an unenviable fate. They were imprisoned under their hometown for the rest of their days. Now Jin was excited that he would be able to find the mirror before the Zippels. 2 weeks later, February 17, 1769, 7 Colors immediately began their investigation. But in 2 weeks they were unable to achieve anything worthwhile. It was expected. The indigenous people of Colin were part of the Kingdom of Phelan, which was part of the Luther Magic Federation. And centuries ago, most of them were killed by Zippels. Because of this, there are not many of them left on Earth. On top of that, since the few that remained were trapped in the ruins of Colin, it was definitely difficult to find someone who could read the map. However, the first clue was found in an unexpectedly close place. There was one man walking around the night city of Tikkun, who was staggering from side to side while humming an uncomplicated melody. His face was red and he had a bottle in his hands. The man's speech was slow and slurred. Suddenly his leg buckled and he fell and hit his head. But even so, he did not let go of the bottle. At that moment, a man approached him. The man looked up with interest and saw the young man in front of him. It was Jin. Jin asked the man if he would share the company with a fellow errant like him. The man couldn't understand that the kid was in front of him and what he needed. But it didn't matter anymore, because Jin swirled a bottle of life-giving liquid in front of him. The man immediately perked up and became very friendly. To him, Jin was just an angel in the flesh. Jin supported the man with his arm, whose name was Pan. Pan was always praising Jin's kindness. Jin only replied that he just likes to help people. Pan was so delighted that he even wanted to introduce Jin to a certain sister. Jin said that Pan had an interesting skin tone. Pan was not particularly surprised by Jin's remark. He heard about it all the time. Pan said that everyone in his tribe has such a skin tone. According to Pan, his tribe was very far from this place, but he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Otherwise, Pan could cry. Jin pulled out a map, saying that he had something from that place. He asked Pan to enlighten him what was written on the map. As soon as Pan saw the card, the bottle fell from his hands and broke. He looked shocked. Furrowing his brows, he shuddered in fear, but his eyes continued to follow everything. At that moment, Murakin and Latri appeared in his field of vision. Pan was scared. He nervously asked who they were and how they found out that he was a Colonian. Jin smiled and revealed the identities of himself and the dragons. Jin said that he was a freeloader of the captain of the Tikkun guards, and Latri and Murakin are dragons. Jin revealed their identities too easily, and Pan wasn't the only one who was amazed. Murakin was unhappy with this. He couldn't figure out why Jin would tell a stranger about all this. Jin replied nonchalantly that Pan had asked him about it. Murakin was not convinced. In his opinion, they should be careful. Pan quickly realized that the people in front of him were clearly not from the Zippel family. Therefore, he was able to calm down a little. But he still wondered how they found him. Jin patiently began to explain the situation to him. From the place that he accidentally stumbled upon the map, he even told me that Latri is the dragon of Asmilla. With his help, they saw the bitter history of the Pan people, how their people were enslaved and used. They tried for a long time to find someone who could tell them about the map, but it was all in vain, until suddenly they met Pan here in Tikkun. Jin insisted that it was a pure coincidence. Jin wasn't going to lie. Since Pug confessed to being a native of Colin, Jin is sure that Pan went through a lot hiding from the eyes of the Zippel family. There's no need to bother him. There was silence, and Pan fell into thought. Was it a coincidence that he met Jin, or were they after him? He came to a conclusion. It wasn't something he could just decide. Pan told them to follow him to meet his little sister. They were greeted by a woman disguised as Pan's sister. She even claimed that she was waiting for them. Although she was much younger than Pan, her brother bowed in her presence. Pan called her the Lady of Laos. He apologized for bringing the guests without her permission. Laos gestured that everything was fine. Murakin frowned and said that this was something new, an unusual atmosphere. The aura of Laos seemed mysterious. Jin couldn't say that she was strong, but she couldn't be approached without caution. She was overflowing with sacred energy. Murakin usually said something like, "Why is the house so shitty?" But he was careful with his language. As soon as Jin saw her, he understood. The natives of Colin have the most noble blood. They were a god-chosen race. She seems to be the last descendant. Laos seemed to have deep wisdom. The next words stunned Jin. She called him born in the homeland of swords and chosen by the shadow. She also knew the identities of Murakin and Latri. Everyone was surprised and stared at Laos. Laos asked them not to be surprised. It was just her gift. A calm attitude, as if she already knew they were coming. Jin had never met a man like Laos. No, he didn't even know if she was even human. He had felt this otherworldly aura before. It was the same aura that he had felt at the moment of contact with Solderit in his previous life. She was weaker, but similar. Jin bluntly asked if she was a goddess by any chance, although it might sound too inappropriate. Everyone else had this question too because of this atmosphere. However, her aura was powerful. It begged the question, is she a goddess? Laos replied with a smile that she was just a vessel. If Laos were a goddess, she would not need to hide away from her native lands. Murakin nodded as if he knew. Lao's was a vessel for God. She has an outstanding epiphany skill, but it's clearly not for long. She's going to lose it all soon. There was no way it could hide from the eyes of the great shadow dragon. Lao stated that Mirakin did not have to pour salt on her wounds. She was well aware of her own situation. Mirakin admitted that he did not expect to meet the god Colin here. He couldn't help but ask what she was the god of. Lao's replied that even if she had told them, they would not have understood, so it didn't matter. She asked Jin to look at the map in his hands. Jin immediately handed her the map, while asking what was written there. Lao slowly read and interpreted the sentences written in their native language. Having found the heart of Colin, who is reading these lines, please do not leave us. Come to the rescue and scream. We are only a humble people. We want to live. Although God gave us a difficult test, He did not give us the strength to cope with it. How unfortunate. That was the content of the map. Lao said that it was the work of her long-dead grandfather. The card had two destinies: become a disaster or bring them hope. Fortunately, the card did not fall into the hands of the Zipples. Her daily prayers were answered. Laos asked if she could propose to them. Mirakin reacted sharply to this. She lost her remaining strength at 5 minutes to 5. In such a situation, it is appropriate to ask for help, not bargain. He said that they were going to Colin anyway. Although he spoke harsh words, Mirakin really wanted to help Laos. Jin also believed that there was no need for a deal. As Mirakin said, they were going to leave anyway, and his original plan was to prevent the Zipples from getting hold of the mirror artifact. Layasa laughed weakly. Although their words seemed kind-hearted, she did not believe in help from a pure heart or compassion. She bluntly stated that Jin must have not heard Solderit's voice for a long time. Jin was a little shocked. Laos offered one thing as a reward. She uses all her remaining power to invoke the deity of Jin, Solderit. Mirakin and Jin exchanged glances. The vessel of the ancient god and the contractor Asmilla. You just don't meet anyone in such times. Mirakin asked what Jin was going to do. Jin didn't think for long. There is no reason to refuse. They'll be heading to the ruins of Colin soon. However, Jin immediately clarified that he could not guarantee that he would be able to save her people and guarantee her safety. He would have helped them if it was as simple as fighting the Zippel mages, getting a mirror, and escorting the natives to safety. But salvation was not beyond his plans. Layasa nodded understandingly. The trip there is already enough. She wanted to tell him more about the internal problems, so she asked him to stay a little longer. Jin did not refuse. Only 3 people were heading to the ruins of Colin: Jin, Murakin, and Kashmir. After the deaths of Andre and Violetta, at no point could Quickhandle show her face to the Zipples. Gilly's powers were still being suppressed, and Anya was too inexperienced to go on such a mission. As for Alice, she needed to stay in Tikkun for safety. Thus, by elimination, the 3 men had to leave. They dressed up as ordinary tourists and got ready to leave. However, they have already encountered a problem. The passage to the ruins of Colin was closed. Everything has changed since Jin's cadet days. The ruins of Colin have become a restricted area, which is closed even during the day. Disappointed, Kashmir shook his head. He needed to send someone to investigate in advance. Previously, they had not sent anyone because of the chances that their plan would be thwarted. Also, since the ruins of Colin were such an open tourist area, they didn't think it was necessary to scout the situation. Murakin snorted. Even if Kashmir had sent someone there, nothing would have changed. Kashmir could only agree with Murakin's words. While everyone was standing in despair, Jin remembered that this had not happened in his previous life. The ruins of Colin were always open before its regression. That's why the incident with the brave journalist happened in the first place. Maybe his cadet mission here has changed something. After dealing with the living golems and committing arson, he returned to his clan. Zippel declared it an accident, not a terrorist attack or invasion. Responsibility. The word flashed through Jin's mind. In his previous life, 11 years later, the world learned about the Zippel family's plan through a journalist. And since the fate of the world has changed because of him, the plan should be revealed sooner. He didn't give a damn about the natives of Colin, whom he had never seen once. However, he didn't want to make their lives more miserable because of his regression. He cannot save them as Laos wanted. However, he does not need to be like the scum of Zippel, who contribute to their suffering. Jin looked at the restricted area sign with the coat of arms of the Zippel family. Kashmir asked what they should do now. If this was an ordinary magic training ground, they would have entered it without difficulty. Jin didn't say anything and walked straight there. Murakin also followed him. Kashmir immediately became agitated and ran after them. Jin asked if they were confused that there was only one warning sign for the entire area. There were no guards, no restrictive magic. There was nothing at all. Surely Zippels can't be so careless in such an important place. If you think about it like that, did they really find the artifact? Jin didn't think that Zippel had found the mirror so quickly. If that were the case, they would have already mass-produced 7th-ranked magicians at the Academy of Magic. Jin suggested that maybe the Zippels hadn't found anything after hundreds of years of excavation and had scored. Murakin confidently stated that Zippels come here to the resort. Suddenly, Murakin sensed something and told the others to stop. They saw some figures at the end of the road. The three hid in the trees to watch them. The people looked pretty depressed. The presence of the natives means that the mirror is still here. And why did the Zippels leave this place? Did they just give up after centuries of trying? As soon as Jin thought about it, he saw a man from the crowd. A man with disheveled silver hair. His hair color is the same as Veridin's, and it looks like a bottle of wine in your hand. A name popped into my mind. Muron Zippel, Kellerk's sixth son, also known as the Psycho of the Seventh Tower. Judging by his nickname, Muron was very hysterical and short-tempered. In the future, he will become a celebrity because of his strange behavior, mainly because it contradicted Zippel's decent image. A purebred Zippel and without an escort, Kashmir could understand Muron's arrogance. He is the master of the seventh tower of magicians. He has the 8th rank and probably a lot of artifacts. Kashmir wouldn't care about the guards either. Murakin's bloodthirsty nature appeared. He immediately offered to take Muron's head off, since there were no guards near him. The Jin cooled his hot head. If there were Zippel magicians in the area instead of Muron, it would be easier to act. They could fight the troops, defeat, and then evacuate the natives of Colin. However, they couldn't do anything because there was a purebred Zippel here. Their enemy is not made with a finger. After Andre's murder, they won't get away with another gray-haired man. They need a good reason so Muron's murder doesn't cause problems with the Zippels. After Andre's death, the Cold War between the Rankandels and the Zippels escalated. The magicians kept silent only because they had no proof that Andre had killed Rankandel. But everything will change if another purebred Zippel dies. In fact, killing was also impossible. Even though Muron looked defenseless, they were sure that he would use defensive spells. The best way was to find evidence regarding their forbidden magic experiments. If they could get proof, then the mage clan wouldn't budge despite Muron's death. The moment Jin finished his sentence, all three of them looked back at the entrance to the ruins at the same time. They felt someone's footsteps. Someone was coming in. The steps were careful. Someone who came without permission, just like them. However, this man was not talented at hiding his tracks. Jin concealed his presence with the energy of the shadows and put a dagger to the throat of the intruder. Jin coldly asked who he was. The invader froze like a statue as soon as he felt the blade. He looked very nervous. It was a man. Jin repeated his question again, but this time it wasn't the legs that cut his skin. The man swallowed and flexed his muscles. He tried to suppress a shudder. Jin thought that this man had courage. It seemed that he was not a knight or a magician, but an ordinary civilian. The man said his name. Dino Jaglun, the reporter. As soon as he heard that name, Jin's eyes widened. Jin remembered that name. Before his regression, Dino Jaglun was a reporter who exposed Zippel's perverse goals and the tragedy of Colin. He put away his dagger. Jin told him to turn around. Dino slowly turned around. Although he looked to be in his 20s, his facial features indicated that he was younger. Jin began to analyze the reporter. A little over 20, a fragile body. This guy wrote an expose on the Zippel family without the slightest fear. And he's already investigating the ruins of Colin, which means he's been on the case for at least 10 years. Jin felt respect for him. A man named Dino, who came out of nowhere with nothing to lose, exposed the Zippel family simply out of pure work ethic. Jin asked if Dino had come looking for another sensation. He was wondering what he was sniffing around here. With fear in his eyes, Dino also began to analyze it, whether it was a person is a subordinate of Zippel's or a simple robber. Or maybe it's a man who also came to explore the ruins of Colin. He nervously asked where they were from. Jin asked him not to strain himself so much. According to him, they were just passing by. Of course, Dino didn't believe it. Jin said that a friend of his from the local area asked him for a favor. But since Dino is a reporter, their goals may coincide. Dino blinked and stared at the three men. A multitude of different emotions made his heart beat faster. Among them, the greatest happiness was to find allies after a long era of loneliness and isolation. He immediately asked if they knew about the situation of the inhabitants of Colin. Nurakin intervened in the conversation. As he did not think it was worth telling everything to this person, Kashmir stopped him, saying it was for the good of the mission. Dino must have come to write an article about Zippels. In his opinion, Jin wants to negotiate cooperation in order to create a strong precedent for attacking a member of the Zippel family. Besides, this reporter should already have some information about the situation here. How much did Dino know about the situation in the ruins of Colin? Perhaps he only had the zeal for his search, and not any valuable information. However, the reporter once again gave a satisfactory answer. Dino pulled the diary out of his chest and handed it to Jin. A log with all the events that took place in the ruins of Colin after the arrival of Muron. January 3, 1796. 3 natives of Colin are missing. Muron probably dragged them into the basement. January 5, 1796. The natives of Colin, with whom he had been talking, had disappeared. He could have interviewed a native. This native said that Murong performed a creepy ritual on them. His eyes were filled with fear and terror. While Jin was calmly reading the magazine, he could only focus on the word ritual. Jin praised Dino for his work. It will cause a lot of hype if this magazine becomes public. Dino said that he even talked to Murong Zippel himself. His visit today was to get some information from him, acting as a friend. Murong is always sitting there having fun and making a fuss. At that moment, Kashmir and Murekin couldn't hide their surprise. They had been waiting since dawn, to no avail. But this reporter had told them everything they needed to know. Jin handed the magazine back to Dino. It is known that courage shone brighter when there was not enough strength. With that in mind, Jin felt great satisfaction looking at Dino. Besides, he had a feeling that the reporter would be a great ally, so he asked him for a favor. Murong Zippel was sitting by the campfire. He cursed the elders of his family. In his opinion, it was too much to send him here because of a little prank. At that moment, he took out his displeasure on the old native. Having organized their raid, they went along the path to Morona. Dino walked in front, the other three followed him. Murong, who was talking to himself, felt their footsteps and waved to Dino. He greeted him with a smile. His gaze became focused for a moment as he looked at the three strangers. Murong casually asked what kind of guests they were. Dino awkwardly informed them that they were wanderers and bards. He thought that Murong would be glad to see new faces. Dino barely managed to keep his composure. He lowered his head. Dino was apologizing for bringing strangers like that. Murong gave up on it. Everything was fine. He just wanted to know where Dino found them. Dino said that he met them in the kingdom of Phylon when he was shopping for medicinal herbs. Dino asked the three of them to introduce themselves. Jin took off his hood and greeted Murong, saying it was an honor to meet him. A crazy grin appeared on Murong's face, which he couldn't hide. Jin recalled the last conversation with Veridin in the space arena. That night they talked about a lot, but in one of the conversations Veridin mentioned that he despised Murong. According to him, Murong was a disgusting person. Murong couldn't even be compared to old Andre. The very thought of him made him sick. He had no idea why the elders had allowed him to become the master of the 7th Mage Tower. Even Dante was surprised by the way Veridin spoke about Murong. What kind of person was this Murong? Veridin said that Murong was a real monster straight from the darkest places, that Dante's innocent mind would never be able to imagine it. He turned to Jin and warned him. Rankandels and Zippels are sure to clash in battle in the future, so in case he bumps into Murong, there's no way he should get into a fight with him. Otherwise, he may face indescribable horror. Murong pointed his finger at them and asked them to tell about their travels. Jin immediately agreed with a smile. He began to flatter Murong. Murong hid his grin. He smiled strangely. Then he squinted into the fire. Suddenly he turned to Dino. They met about 2 weeks ago. To be honest, he was very interested in Dino, a reporter who has no compunction about entering the Zippel restricted area. There are no such people, so he asked who he was. Dino was sweating all over with fear. He stuttered and apologized. Murong hugged him in a friendly way, saying that he did not run into him. It was just a thought out loud. Murong didn't seem to be angry at all. But the next moment, his face changed. He asked bluntly why the hell Dino was talking to the locals. Murong chuckled. Dino didn't know what to do, so he just waited for his next words. The others were on edge. They felt that the situation was moving faster than expected. Meanwhile, Murong continued to speak. Every time he left, Dino poked his nose into the wrong business. This greatly infuriated Murong, because he had to clean up those with whom Dino was in contact. Dino couldn't seem to believe his ears when he heard the word clean up. Murong grinned and patted Dino's head. Hadn't it occurred to him? All his interlocutors disappeared at the suggestion of Murong. Dino was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. He just looked at Murong like a dead fish. Murong burst into hysterical, manic laughter. His body was shaking. He was shaking so much that he would stick his head in the fire if he wasn't careful. Murong called them insects. Did they really think they were worthy of communicating with him on equal terms? That's hilarious. He broke the bottle, causing the contents to spill onto the bonfire. The flames flared up with renewed vigor. The only thing Murong couldn't understand was how they had so much confidence. But what Murong realized is that Dino has balls. Murong stopped laughing and looked at Jin. The Garden of Swords. He knew who these travelers really were. Jin wasn't too surprised by this. He did not expect that he could easily deceive a member of the Zippel family. Murekin stood up and grabbed Dino's shoulder. Jin swung the sword first. At the same time, Kashmir stabbed Murong in the back, and Murekin jumped away from Dino to safety. Something deflected 2 swords. It was a force field of condensed mana, hidden by fire. Jin stepped back, clicked his tongue, and froze. Jin couldn't detect that much mana. Was that why his face was close to the fire? Murekin was shocked. Even though Murong didn't use spiritual energy, he could completely hide the use of mana. Murekin immediately shouted that the presence of magic could be hidden, but not its effect. Murong clearly had more aces up his sleeve. Murong looked at Jin and said his full name. Muron clearly knew that he was Jin Rankandel. He even knew that Jin had come here at the request of the girl with a blindfold. Jin didn't talk much. He believed that Muron would not tell how he knew all this in a good way. So it's going to be bad. There was no need to know where Muron had seen him. Among the 4 Zippels who came to the banquet, one could draw Jin's appearance and share it with the clan. Come to think of it, Jin is just an ordinary backup flag bearer. Muron was wondering how Jin got to Laos. Jin wasn't in the mood to answer that question. Muron talked too much. He was annoyed by such feigned hysteria. He's already tired of it. He couldn't attack. Many condensed spheres of mana appeared from the fire surrounding Muron. These 3 had never seen such magic. However, they could sense that this magic was dangerous. The mana spheres quickly froze. Instantly, Muron threw ice spheres at Jin. Each of the 9 cannonball-sized ice balls split into 3 smaller projectiles. Jin and Kashmir have dodged to the side. Murakan also dodged, having to protect Dino. Seeing the rest of the shells flying towards the natives, Murakan cursed and carried Dino lying on the shoulders of the dragon. The natives froze in fear. After all, normal people couldn't dodge the fast projectiles. Murakan rushed at the bullets and smashed them with his fists. Murakan left Dino here so he wouldn't get in the way and took the locals out of here. Dino immediately began to call the natives to him, but they could only mumble with tears in their eyes. It sounded like something was stuck in the native's throat. Then Dino noticed a terrifying sight. Most of them had deep cuts on their necks. It wasn't the wound they had received the day before. Their vocal cords were severed. Jin also saw this atrocity. At least 70% of the locals had their vocal cords cut. Dino, frozen in place, looked at Muron and screamed, his eyes filled with tears and hatred. He cursed him for being so cruel. Muron's manic grin distorted his face. Her eyes widened to look like half moons, and her hair fluttered in the wind. Moreover, instead of Jin and Kashmir, he targeted the natives. He was laughing like a madman. Muron had been waiting for this exact moment for so long to see such an expression on Dino's face. Jin froze. Muron continued to laugh. However, it only lasted for a moment. Muron couldn't read anything on his impassive face. However, Murakan could read the mind of his god's contractor. It was rage. Muron's laughter stopped as his face was punched. Muron was slammed into the ground. Jin now had enough of such an excuse to take Muron's life. Muron was able to use protection magic at the last moment. Otherwise, he would have been in a lot of trouble. Shadow energy slowly surrounded the blade. The surrounding darkness slowly became darker and deeper. When the energy of Jin's shadows was released, the environment turned black. The thickening darkness gathered on his blade. This was his first time using the release after his shadow energy reached rank 5. Kashmir swallowed. He had seen Jin's swordsmanship for a long time. However, Jin looked like a different person when Bradamante broke free. Muron's face was unsightly. The energy of the shadows was draining his magic. Suddenly, he came to a conclusion. He laughed, realizing that Soldred was hanging out with the Rankandels again. According to him, it was clear that Soldred had violated some kind of agreement. Jin did not answer, but gave a sign to Murakan and Kashmir before pointing to the sky. They looked up at the same time. Hundreds of ice balls hovered in the sky, several times more than the Zippel had previously shot. The transparent projectiles were barely visible, being camouflaged in the night sky. There was no particular reason why Murakan and Kashmir couldn't detect them. Muron simply didn't have a noticeable flow of mana. Jin, who was the most experienced of the wizards among the 3, found out about it after some time of thought. He concluded that Muron was cooking something nasty. Regaining his composure, Muron chuckled. It took a long time to prepare the spells, but Jin still can't save all the cockroaches. Muron didn't want to talk any further. It seemed to him that he was facing mongrels, not people. Jin stood up, his sword overflowing with aura. His legs were light as a feather when Murakan threw him at Muron with great force and speed. The magician frantically created a force field and fired the nearest ice bullets at Jin. However, the ice shells couldn't stop Jin. In the blink of an eye, all the bullets shattered into ice crystals and fell helplessly to the ground. Every time Muron blinked, the blade was closer than before. At that moment, he fell into a dilemma. He doubted if his force field would be able to deflect Jin's blade. He won't be able to. Quickly making a conclusion, Muron quickly snatched out his wand. Instantly, he cast several advanced spells. This time, Jin also couldn't read the mana. 3 spells were cast. 7 rank fire spell, fire barrier, 7 rank ice spell, ice wall, wind spell of the 8th rank, mysterious hell wind. Few magicians could cast so many spells in such a short period of time. The mysterious hellwind is a spell that summons sharp blades of wind. A brutal spell, infamous for its ability to chop down an enemy. Muron liked to use it. Besides, it was a very difficult spell. After running through the ice shells, Jin stopped and became covered with shadow energy. Muron smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. The hellwind won't stop until the caster either dies or his mana runs out. The spell began to scratch and tear at Jin's barrier, and feeling an ominous chill, Muron turned his head. a helmet with two twinkling eyes. The energy barrier was a distraction. Jin waited for the moment when the wind blades would deflect, straighten out and block Miran's view. Then, because the magician's view was limited, he quickly shifted. If Jin hadn't known about the Hellwind, he wouldn't have done this. Even the caster himself would not be able to determine the exact time in which Jin could react. Surprised, Miran quickly withdrew the spell. He wanted to stop wasting mana and focus on his fire and ice barriers. He finally realized how hard and powerful Jin's punch had been. Waving the Bradamante, Jin's eyes flashed. Miran had never seen anything like it before. He had fought many knights, and there were those who could cut off his magic with a sword. However, he could not imagine how quickly Bradamante, released, would be able to break through the barriers. As the sword approached him, Miran could only step back with a shocked expression on his face. However, along with this expression came excitement. A magic circle began to glow on the ground where Jin was standing. The trap. Miran regained his confidence when he saw that Jin had fallen into his trap. Jin swung Bradamante to cut the chains. However, no matter how much he swung his sword and broke the chains, new ones appeared and bound him. Jin broke free from the chains. He strengthened his shadow energy and then attacked, destroying the magic circle. However, his surroundings were still glowing with mana. Many magic circles were suspended in the air, so he couldn't move freely either. Miran lived up to his nickname of the Madman. How many traps did he set? Jin couldn't read his mana flow, so he couldn't sense these traps. The ruins of Kalin were no longer ruins with multiple traps. Now it looked like a kind of magical fortress. Jin had never fought someone in a place with so many ready-made spells. Although it seemed like he had easily escaped the mana chains, in fact, it took a big toll on him. Gathering an explosive amount of spiritual energy right after he released the blade was not an easy task. If all his traps are like that, it's going to be a little problematic. Jin couldn't use shadow energy for so long. He'll just die of exhaustion before he gets to Miran. Murakan and Kashmir were busy rescuing the natives. They couldn't help until all the ice shells were deflected. Murakan started shouting at Dino to take all the natives away. Miran laughed. It was all useless. These magic circles will reach wherever his gaze falls. Everyone, without exception, will die. Now Miran can finally have some fun. Miran waved his staff in the air, and another trap was triggered. This time, a concentrated mana ray shot out from behind Jin. As he prepared to rush to the side to dodge, dozens of smaller magic circles activated. Jin knew this spell well. The Torn Earth, an earth spell of the 8th rank, in which any object within the magic circle disintegrates and is absorbed by the earth. There are only two ways to evade the spell. Either destroy the magic with stronger spells, or leave the area surrounded by magic circles. Instead of rushing into activated earth spells, it's better to get hit by a giant laser. Jin used Bradamante to cut through the beam of light. Sparks of mana flew in all directions and burned Jin's skin. Fortunately, he did not receive any serious injuries. Jin felt that something was wrong. Although Jin couldn't read Miran's mana flow just by looking at the spells, he knew that Miran needed to use an insane amount of mana at the same time. This is not a power of the 8th rank. Either Miran has become a rank 9, or he has a mana enhancement artifact. He must find and destroy it. Miran was serious now. The young man in front of him was well versed in magic. He thought Jin's deviation from the Hellwind was a coincidence. However, his calm and collected actions while activating several traps and dodging the Torn Earth were too perfect to be a coincidence. Miran came to a shocking conclusion. Rankandel was a swordsman magician. Jin didn't deny it. Miran was the master of the 7th Tower of Magicians for a reason. He was definitely much stronger, even though he had a terrible temper. In a manners-obsessed society like the Zippel family, his magic had to be much stronger to compensate for his scumbag behavior. Seeing that Jin didn't deny it, Miran was sure that Jin was a swordsman mage. Miran, who had been keeping his distance all this time, approached Jin. It would be strange if he engaged in close combat against an opponent like Jin, who had a sword released. All his traps were working fine, so there was no need to close the gap. However, Jin instantly understood the wizard's purpose: counterflow of mana, the most dangerous and lethal symptom for mana holders. It is manifested by a multitude of explosions in the magician's body with concomitant damage to organs and body. The outcome of the battle was more predictable for magicians than for knights. A mage with stronger magic could summon an overabundance of mana and easily end a battle. A fairly simple but effective way to rank magicians. Jin didn't like it, surrounded by dozens of activating traps. He couldn't move between all the magic circles. Conversely, Miran passed through them as if nothing had happened, so Jin's sturdy and powerful body was excluded from the fight. However, in close combat, martial arts and swordsmanship were not Jin's only skills. When Miran gathered an incredible amount of mana in his wand and prepared to strike Jin, a flash, an ancient light spell that gave him a second chance in times of danger. A powerful light flashed between them. Jin smiled with relief, and Miran staggered back, covering his eyes with his hands. He couldn't see anything now. He felt nothing, as if he was floating in the void. Muron only saw the light in the distance. While he was disoriented, Jin decided to attack him immediately. The particles of the energy of darkness dispersed, leaving a trail of the blade behind them. The feeling of cutting flesh and bones. Jin could feel it in his fingertips. The left hand. It's disappointing. He wanted to cut Murong in half, but Jin could only cut his left arm. The magician used his mana and compressed the air to change the trajectory of the Bradamant. Muron's left hand fell to the ground, and a swirl of dark mist swirled around the wound. The same thing was happening to his shoulder. The remaining spiritual energy corroded bones and flesh. Murong took a deep breath and conjured a small magic sword. He cut off a wound infected with dark spiritual energy. He didn't care that his arm was cut off. He was enjoying the fight. Muron's reaction is not like any magician. It looks more like a beast. He's weak compared to Andre, but he's still a formidable opponent. Jin knew he wouldn't be able to kill with another attack, so instead he planned to escape from the area teeming with traps. In any case, all the ruins of Colin were covered with traps. Despite this, Jin came to the conclusion that the most dangerous are here. At that moment, Murong glanced to the side and laughed. Jin then began to keep a close eye on him. Muron said that Jin probably thought he was just another madman and that there was nothing in common between them. But this is not true. They are of the same field of berries. It was Muron's mistake. Jin sighed. It is obvious that Muron was stalling with such cliched phrases. It wasn't cool at all. Suddenly, Muron laughed crazily again. Did Jin really think he could kill him? Muron said that Jin should not forget that the local scum protects him. So far, he's used 3. Jin reinterpreted this phrase. He told Murona to stop beating around the bush. Seeing Jin's interest, Murong chuckled inwardly. People like them do everything to achieve a goal. Jin must have already noticed that his magic is far beyond the 8th rank. But how is that? Muron shot a ball of mana at a small building. The structure, already damaged by falling ice, was destroyed. It was a basement where the natives were dragged, as Dino described it. The dust settled and revealed a bunch of people covered in ruins. Not all of them were visible. However, this was definitely the destination of Murong's victims. Muron admitted that he could use high-ranking magic because of this. They became his mana incarnation weapon. Jin tightened his grip on Bradamante. Murong asked if Jin had noticed that even the most fried ones were still moving. That's because he didn't let them die. After all, they are the source of his mana. Murong called for killing him, but for that it would be necessary to kill all the natives. The tough Murong put Jin in a dilemma. He said he and Jin were the same. Nothing is an obstacle for them on the way to achieving their goal. So he urged Jin to get rid of these natives as soon as possible. At that moment, the girl shouted that it was all a lie. The woman was limping. She was hiding near a destroyed building when she got caught in the rubble. And there was one reason why the woman was there. She thought that maybe she could save the people in the building while Jin was fighting Murong. Not because they were alive, but because she wanted to create an honorable grave for them. She said that the source of Muron's power was not them, but a divine relic. Muron's plan began to crumble. When Jin heard about the relic, he thought it was about the mana fountain. The girl sobbed and said that those people who were supposedly on the verge of death were dead. Murong wanted to silence her, but it was too late. Muron's face wrinkled. He wanted to see Jin guarding a bunch of people with his life, following the delusion of their livelihood. The girl continued talking. This heartless parody of man, indulging his sadistic tendencies, turned her people into laboratory rats. Murong was trying to trick Jin into subjugating him to his will. She begged to kill this monster. 2 blue flames flashed in Muron's eyes. Fire began to spread from the girl's ankles. Although she was seriously injured, she had enough strength to shout at Jin and his allies. However, at the moment when the blue flame burned her skin, a normal person could not bear such pain. Murong was too angry right now. She dared to spoil all his fun. Jin had to scream and scream at the realization that their blood on his hands was wasted. That would be the highlight of today's performance. Dino called Jin. He asked to save this girl. This was Tika, the head of the tribe, the only local leader. She must not be allowed to die. The spell of the Zippel family, the evil eye of the azure flame. He had heard about it from his master in the past, but this was the first time he had seen it in action. Zippel's secret techniques are dangerous, but the evil eye of the azure flame is the most annoying. Just because Zippel looked at you, you will be engulfed in an inextinguishable blue flame. If you try to put it out, you can catch fire yourself. You can only burn it. They knock out a wedge with a wedge. You can't try to neutralize it with ice or a healing spell. He must suppress it with a stronger flame. A stronger flame. I immediately remembered the name. The ruler of the fiery dimension. Phoenix Tess. Flaming blue wings appeared in the gap. Every time they moved, a hot wind would spread everywhere. Muron couldn't believe his eyes. He blinked slowly several times. He saw Tess in front of him, a legend that every magician dreams of. The Zippel family magicians were very disappointed when they couldn't sign a contract with Tess, because becoming the owner of Tess meant becoming the best magician of the era. Muron couldn't accept that someone from the Rankandel family would become the greatest wizard of the era. Was Jin going to surpass Murong without his permission? Murong's laughter had long disappeared. On the other hand, Jin smiled. Once Tess was summoned, the gaze of the azure flame would have no chance against the true blue flame. The power of the Flame Lord. Tess could make it so that the wounds inflicted by the pathetic imitation of the blue flame never existed. Tika slowly opened her eyes. She wasn't hurt or hot, but she was sure that her body was on fire. But now there was not even a speck on the skin. It was as if the flames were protecting her now. Jin suddenly thanked her, thus pulling her out of her thoughts. If it wasn't for Tika, Jin would have fallen for Muron's trick. Now she didn't have to worry. Tika was still worried. She said that Murong uses a mana source. Although he has not fully mastered it, he can use the words keys that he extracted from the locals. The artifact itself was still hidden. She asked if they had come at the request of the Princess of Laos. After Jin nodded, Tika said she would tell him where the artifact was kept. If, of course, he can defeat Muron. She begged Jin to stop their pain. Jin certainly couldn't refuse. Even without a reward, he would have killed a monster like Murong. Murong couldn't contain his hatred and anger. A frown distorted his face. Jin turned around and looked at him. Jin could easily read Murong's expression. Jin was sure that Murong was humiliated because he had summoned Tess. He doesn't want to admit that he is weaker and worse. Murong looked furious. That's why Jin chose his words carefully to provoke him even more. Now Jin was ready to kill Murong. It was time to go to hell. The blue fire in the magician's eyes went out. In Tess's presence, his spell was meaningless. Murong cursed, calling Jin an arrogant brute. Murong began to cast a spell, which the clan restored and declared a secret technique. At one point, he was the lover of the witch Helen. He drank from one with the kings of the Black Sea. A dark funnel appeared. If Jin wanted to send him to hell, then he would be happy to show what real hell is. Tess screamed as if she was angry. The phoenix released fire with tremendous pressure on Murong. It was a completely different level than the one used on Alice. Even the summoner, Jin, could feel the weight of the pressure from the fire. Tess is furious. What the hell kind of spell is this anyway? That was what Jin was thinking. Suddenly Murekin jumped towards him. He reported that Muron had cast a spell of obsession with Orgel. Orgel is the demon king, so they need to stop him as soon as possible. At that moment, Murekin gathered the shadows cast by Tess's fire and transformed them into shadow energy. Murekin shot out the energy of the shadows, as if releasing the breath of a dragon. The blue flames and the energy of the shadows were absorbed, but Jin realized that none of the attacks were effective. A strange purple energy protected him, something Jin had never seen before. Tess's fiery breath with the highest pressure should have prevented the portal from opening completely. Murekin covered the hell gate with his shadow energy so that Jin could use his sword. It was a sign, gathering the energy of the shadows, as his mana was rapidly depleted due to Tess's summoning, was almost impossible for Jin. As soon as he gathered the energy of the shadows, the first signs of a counterflow appeared. Blood gushed out of his mouth, and he immediately felt himself fainting. As his mana became more unstable, Tess's strength gradually decreased. The pressure of the blue flame became noticeably weaker, and Muron took this chance to repeat the spell. Muron had already imagined that he would become the chosen one of the Heller Dagger. He wanted to end his life at the peak of glory and have a blessed descent into hell. Jin tightened his grip on the sword and rushed forward. The counterflow was due to the absorption of shadow energy, and Jin's desire to move came from his night spirit, the ability to make the same sword swings 10,000 times, a stage where he could show determination through the sword. Although the mind blade was far away from him, right before he lost consciousness, cut it up. As if chanting a spell, he chanted the word. Every step he took towards Muron was accompanied by this word. In order to fully manifest their goal to cut the portal, just like the ancient magical swordsmen of Rankandel gathered their power, the spiritual energy on Bradamante's blade was slowly boiling. It was completely absorbed into the blade, and the sword seemed to be born again. Compared to before, the blade now shone, reflecting the moonlight, as if it had been honed and polished to perfection. Jin jumped to the gates of hell. Sensing this, Muron shuddered. He realized that his plan had failed. The gates of hell that were cut through by the sword let out a loud screech and turned into nothing. The flames of Tess burned Muron's body alive, leaving behind only a charred body that hung by a thread from death. He still hasn't changed with defeat. Jin was breathing heavily and looking at Bradamante, remembering the recent release of the shadow. It was the first time he had felt something like this. Was it really a response from the heart? With his last breath, Muron grabbed his magic staff, wanting to cast at least one spell. But it was too late. He fell and his body fell apart. Jin fell to the ground as it was over. There were blue veins on his face, but he didn't have any serious injuries. Bradamante has returned to its original form. Although the wizard's death left a strange aftertaste, Jin couldn't think anymore. His exhaustion made staying awake unbearable. Some of the words of his magic teacher came back to Jin's mind. The magic staffs of the Zippel family magicians had an interesting feature. A rune is inscribed on the knob. When its owner activates it, the rune sends a distress signal to the Tower of Magicians. This meant that it was too early to relax the rolls. Jin heard a voice calling him to wake up. When Murakin saw that Jin had woken up, he immediately opened his mouth and poured powder from the unicorn's horn into it. Young Rankandel's body shuddered. Jin vomited dark blood. The unicorn's horn dealt best with the counterflow of mana. However, if the consumer was above the 7th rank, then he became ineffective. Jin felt much better after that. The flow of mana calmed down. The same cannot be said about the energy of shadows and aura. Kashmir came up to him. Jin thanked them. He asked when they managed to get it. Kashmir replied that it was not their fault. He looked at Tika and Dino. They were the ones who gave the horn. Dino told me that he learned about the horn from Muran. He once mentioned that he had stolen a unicorn horn from the family home. And Tika found this horn. Tika bowed and introduced herself properly. She is Latika Mamutika, a novice of Miss Laos. Tika was crying and bowing to Jin. Jin's rescue will never be forgotten. The Holy Miss of Laos probably asked them to be saved, but she didn't mean literally, but to help restore their sacred relic. Jin didn't know how to react to this. Jin knew about the relic, but Murakin didn't. That's why he wanted to know about it. He is a dragon who has lived for 3,000 years, but he had never heard of any relics in these parts in his life. Murakin generally thought that all this was a bluff, but the magic power of the blonde freak was incredible, so they wanted to say that it was the fault of the relic. Murakin frowned and asked which god they worshipped. Tika said that this god's name was Klom. It was the first time Murakin had heard of this name. Although he spoke nonchalantly, Murakin still felt sorry for the natives. Whoever saw their plight would also feel pity, as long as it wasn't a man named Muran. Kashmir warned them not to linger here. Although this place is a wilderness, it is still the territory of the Zippels. It is unknown how quickly they will react to what has happened, but there is a small problem about it. Tika said that in order to possess the relic, it needs to be restored, and for this it is necessary to break the seal with the help of the rays of the sun. Murakin was puzzled. It's night, what is sun? Tika said they had to wait until noon, and then perform the ritual with the members of the tribe, so they need to be returned to the city. Tika felt awkward, because she was giving her rescuers so much trouble. Murakin could only sigh. It's always complicated. They need to hurry up and leave before Murang's relatives come here. However, since there are no witnesses other than the natives and Dino, it was possible to hold out until the next morning. In fact, they were in a gated community run by the Zippel family. Even if the sun was high, no one would approach this place. The Zippel, the relic, and the midday sun. Something was wrong. Something was missing. Something extremely important. For ages, Tess Muran was a corpse. Moreover, it is a wilderness that even the Zippels have abandoned. But here's the problem. Jin headed towards Murang's corpse. He said that Murang Zippel is a tower master from the family. Murakin snapped in displeasure upon hearing the obvious fact. Kashmir immediately realized something. If he is right, then the last wave of Murang's magic staff will activate the rune. Jin grabbed the staff and showed them the glowing head. This meant that guests would arrive here soon. 6 dragons circled the ground. It was reinforcements from the 7th tower. The main one in this place was Midor Elner, the deputy of the 7th tower. Kashmir began to take this matter very seriously. The rune on the staff undoubtedly meant that Muran was the master of the Tower of Magicians. Murakin was not convinced. Well, the master in the master, what to mumble about? Murakin did not know about the existence of such a mechanism in the staffs of Zippels. It was not something that was developed during his period of activity. Kashmir explained that masters with such staffs could summon all the lower-ranking magicians. Tika and Murakin were shocked. Murakin wondered how Jin knew about this. Jin replied that he had learned about it from his sister Luna. Thanks to the words of his teacher, spoken during the loss of consciousness, he will not be taken by surprise. Kashmir sighed. Each tower has at least 100 mages. If you only take rank 7 and 8, then half of them will be enough to wipe them off the face of the earth. Not even half of it. A quarter of the mages will be more than enough to deal with this trio. Tika was depressed. They will not miss this chance after centuries of being under the yoke of the Zippel family. Jin asked Kashmir how long it would take the magicians to get here. Kashmir immediately gave away his guess. The 7th tower was located in the far north of the continent. Even with the help of a teleporter, they will get there in 2 hours at best. Jin thought about it. 2 hours. 2 whole hours. In any case, we need strong reinforcements that can come as soon as possible. As a temporary flag bearer, contacting Luna again would be problematic, and Jin's other siblings would not allow him to do so. Reinforcements, not from his clan, capable of fighting the Zippels, arrive at the ruins of Colin immediately. There were few such allies. Having made the final decision, Jin looked at Kashmir and made a request. Jin quickly explained his plan, and Kashmir's expression froze. He wasn't sure if it would work out. Jin didn't answer because he wasn't sure himself. Kashmir tried to reason with Jin. A second's delay and everyone here will die, including Jin himself. Moreover, it was not about ordinary people. They will probably be refused. Jin replied that he didn't have to worry about it. The agreement is already there. There was little time, so he hurried Kashmir. All hope was on him. This put a lot of pressure on Kashmir, but he soon calmed down. He promised to do it no matter what. Kashmir only asked that they hold out until then. Jin and the natives wanted to start a ritual to restore the relic. Tika looked at the natives. Murakin snorted. He was full of doubts that the idea was good. Jin suddenly started coughing. Although he got better, he did not fully recover. He looked at the palm where the blood was. Jin definitely overdid it. Murakin scolded Jin. He barely killed one Zippel, but he also coveted his sixes. Jin needed to learn to accept defeat. Jin was calm. Sister Luna will help them. And Kashmir went after someone. It was understandable, but Murakin was a little doubtful that Kashmir would make it in time. Jin replied that he would be in time with the teleporter, and if not, then they will have to overcome. 6 dragons circled over the ruins. The ground darkened under their shadows. Unfortunately, Jin, Dino, Murakin, and all the others were unable to escape from the crime scene. The natives have already begun the ritual for the return of the divine relic. The land of their temple simply had to be next to Muran's corpse. Although Murang's corpse was removed, the natives could not hide because they were performing a ritual to get a mirror. For them, getting the mirror into the right hands was more important than their own lives. Jin and Murakin could not hide, as they had to protect the natives from an ambush. Myron was angry when he heard that Muran was not visible there. One of the magicians calmed him down, saying that perhaps Muran was being held hostage. Midor swore that if anything happened to Muran, everyone involved would beg him for a quick death. Murakin was watching them from the ground. There were 6 dragons and 30 magicians. If things go really badly, then Murakin will have to take the form of a dragon. But then the whole Zippel family can come, so Jin needs to do his best. Jin used Malta's rune to hide his face. Murakin sighed bitterly. If he had been at his best, there would have been nothing left of them. Inwardly, he cursed Temur. His wounded heart still ached from the pain.